welcome. Good to see you.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for having me, mate.
Thank you so much for volunteering your time. We were just saying before, the most popular speaker at our Takeoff conference.
Yeah, mate, you're a joke. But anyway, I'll take it.
All right, let's get into it. Will, your tips for working remotely?
My tips for working remotely are, and I know this sort of all sounds mindset stuff, but when you get up in the morning, it's about winning the morning and winning the day. So I have very much an attitude that if I can get up and have the same process as I would do if I was working in an office, and that's do my exercise, my meditation, breakfast with the family, and then make my calls, my 30 calls every single day. That's going to set me up. That's pretty much, once I've achieved that, my day is mine. So working remotely is very much the same as going into the office. Is just quite literally you're not physically in the office. And I also think setting meetings early so that you've actually, as far as teams are concerned, I've got an 8:30 WIP meeting with my team. So they all know they have to get up, get showered, get dressed, and get into their chair by 8:30. So I think if you can get up and get into work straight away, that's going to help you go a long way through the day.
Very good. And you did mention about mindset. So the second question was around how are you keeping your mindset up and about during these times, and what are you doing there?
Yeah, I think attaching to people who you can leverage your own mindset from. So there's 4 or 5 people that are really positive influences in my life. And I'm sure they have their days, obviously, where they're down. But if I'm having a flat day, I straight away get on the phone to one of them, and they very quickly bounce me back into reality, put my mind back into perspective. Naturally, I'm a fairly positive person anyway, so it doesn't come... I don't need it all that time, but I think that when you bounce off other positive people, you can't help but feel that way yourself. So influences, I guess that's in brief, and exercise, diet. I know this sounds cliche, but legitimately, if you're fueling your body with the best fuel and you're exercising, the endorphins are going to work in your head. So I think if you can tick off all of those, you should go a long way to actually having a pretty positive mindset.
Good on you. Perfect. And in the current market to win listings, there's going to be some vendors that are sitting on the fence that are saying, oh, should I go or should I not go? Those type of potential sellers, what sort of conversations are you having with those people?
Yeah, in this market in particular, and I know this may not be what you want the listeners to hear, but it's not. I don't want to push a fence sitter into selling. In actual fact, it's about being probably more on the conservative side. And if they still want to sell, at least you've set them up and you've got a listing that is motivated. So I'd much rather retain a relationship and not get that business now, but in 6, 12, 18 months, pick up that business because I haven't forced them to do something that they against their will at this point in time. So I'd much rather have sort of 10 motivated vendors than 20 unmotivated. So it's about telling them how you perceive the market to be. The fact is, in my mind, the market's better today than it will be tomorrow, and it's better tomorrow than it will be the next day. So if they do want to sell, there's buyers out there. There's not as many listings, so properties are transacting, but it's just about working out that vendor's motivation and working towards it.
And then off-market sales, are you undertaking many of those, and what are you doing in that space?
Yeah, so we have sold, my team and I have sold 3 off markets in the last 2 weeks, and that's based on those fence sitters that you just mentioned earlier. Our program now is, if they're not that keen to go to market, is let's test the market before we go to market. So we've got a pool of hot buyers that we're dealing with at the moment, and they're broken down to price category. And if I go to a property that the owner wants $1 million, I can determine that we've got, say, 12 hot buyers for that. Let's get those 12 groups through, and one of 2 things will happen. We'll either sell it for what the owner wants, or the active market will tell us where the value is in their mind, and then the vendor can make an informed decision. So 3 off-market sales, but we've had probably 7 or 8 that we've actually had buyers through, but the other ones haven't transacted. So it's not all of them.
Yeah. And then from the purchaser's point of view, what type of conversations are you having with the buyers to try to keep them in the market and looking for property?
Yeah, buyers are interesting at the moment. They're quite hard to deal with. There's no doubt about it. They're not just jumping in and making offers willy-nilly, but it's about putting things into perspective. And the facts are that we haven't seen much of a decline in the values at the moment. I think that will change, but the analogy I use with them at the moment is you might get a better deal elsewhere. You might, but you're not going to get a better home. So if a buyer is looking at a home that they love and it's for their family and it's in the school zone or whatever it might be, I just tell them stories about the GFC when I sold properties to people who were bargain hunters, and then a year later, they hated the home. They just bought it because it was cheap. They end up having to sell it, buying something else. That's about $100,000 changeover. So don't look for a bargain, look for the home that you want, and negotiate for it. But it's you go to a shoe store and there's a pair of shoes there for $500, the identical pair of shoes that's 2 sizes smaller for $450. Which pair do you buy? You buy the ones that fit you. So it's the same analogy with a buyer.
Good analogy. And so qualification of purchases,
Yep.
I guess the current environment has enabled us to be able to perhaps be a little bit more direct with some questioning. How are you going about doing that? Are you qualifying heavily, or are you just trying to get anyone through it at this point?
Yeah. 2 weeks ago, we were trying to get anyone and everyone through. And then all of a sudden we've been averaging about 14 private inspections a day with my team. And it's been too much. So this week alone, we've started to really break down the buyers and what their motivation is to buy, whether they've got pre-approval, what else they've looked at, if they've made offers on those properties. Those sort of questions are then allowing us to align those with those vendors. But it's also saying to a buyer, like, unless you're really keen to buy this home or another one on our books, let's not put yours, ours, and our vendors' health at risk. So it's a pretty easy way to say that to a buyer rather than be firm and say, if you don't have the money, you can't come and look at it. It's more talking about health risks, and they have a lot of empathy around that.
And back to your prospecting comment earlier, Will, 30 calls a day. The OC team had a great session with Josh Fegan yesterday, and we had discussed around touching base with people to help, to see if they need any help. What's your take on your 30 calls a day, and what are the percentage of people that are saying are welcoming your call versus not? The fear of rejection. Well, what are you actually saying to those purchasers to add value?
If you don't ask a question, then you can't get as far as are they prepared to sell, you can't get a rejection. So nothing's to do with real estate at the moment, in my opinion. It's about being a human being and not a real estate agent in this climate. And what about talking about how we can help financially? What about, have you had, at the moment, everyone's talking about trying to save as much money as possible. Have you had your mortgage looked at from a mortgage broker lately? So, trying to act as a consultant and actually try and save the money rather than are you thinking of selling, you'll never get anywhere that way. So to me, it's about, at the moment, building relationships for the other end of this, whenever it might be, not trying to take people from not wanting to sell to wanting to sell at the moment. I think that's the biggest mistake anyone can make at the moment.
And tips, Will, for agents that might have found themselves with a bit of analysis paralysis around who to call. How do you make your call lists, and do you take notes on paper, or are you entering it into the database as you go? Can you talk us through your process there?
Yeah, so I've got, we use a program called Rita. I'm not sure whether you've heard of it, but it's basically an AI program that syncs with your database, and it artificially determines who the people are that really want to be spoken to based on, can tell if someone's jumped on realestate.com, for instance, and then puts them into your list for the day. So rather than me sit there and try and work out of the 1,200 people in my database, who do I call, it pretty much does that for me. If a new listing comes up in a street, it then populates the people around that property and puts them into my call list for the day as well. If a property's sold, it will do that as well. So it spits out about 15 to 20 calls a day for me to make, and then the balance are made up of past purchases and past vendors.
Very good. We've using Rita as well. We were early adopters, and it's I'm told that it's evolved now, and it's and your call success out of the 15, are you having to park many of those because they're irrelevant, or are you finding that most of them are the right people to call?
Yeah, so that's where the analysis paralysis comes in, is that if I determine in my mind whether I should call them or not, I'll inevitably call them because I'll make a reason in my mind not to. So I actually try not to create a perception of what that client wants before I call it. Often my tactic is I'll call the number and press dial and then work out what I'm going to say, because you just have to speak. Once they pick up, you've just got to talk shit. So that's the way I've kind of always operated, is I dial a number and press call and then determine what I'm going to say, which might sound really silly, but it saves you a lot of time as well.
And to wrap up, Will, I know that you're super busy, but you always given such generous time to OC, and I know that you do to the industry, so thank you. But to wrap up, is there anything else that you're doing in your business or your agents that you're seeing that are doing good things that we should be focusing on over the coming quarter or so?
No, I think it's just, and once again, as cliche as it is, it's just one day at a time, because we don't know when the end of this will be. So all I can say is every day I get up and I'm just trying to enjoy the life that we're now living in, because we're all under a roof. We've all got food, we've all got family or spouses or, someone else around us. Isn't that what we do real estate for in the first place, is to afford to be able to do those things, and we have them. So it's just getting your head in the right space, and then I think the rest takes care of itself. But from a scripts and dialogues, Tom Panos sort of point of view, what's been working really well for me lately when I'm talking to vendors is some vendors are saying, we'll wait, or, let's see how we go, or we don't have to take that offer, we'll see what else comes along. My dialogue with them is that on the way up, when the market's improving, the buyers set the market. They're the ones under competition that determine the values and set the market. On the way down, which we're in at the moment, it's the vendor that has to sell the most that sets the market. So if a vendor that I'm talking to wants $1 million, if the neighbour down the street sells for 900, then now their property's worth close to 900, and that's not their choice. That's the seller that had to sell. So you may not be in a hurry, but the people around you that are, they're going to make sure that the market declines, and that's something that none of us can control. So to me, that puts into the vendor's mind that, oh shit, maybe I can't control everything in my world, and I've got to look at what the buyers are prepared to offer now.
Yeah, and that's a real potential issue, isn't it? I mean, none of us know whether this this period of time will be a V-shaped recovery in real estate, or more of a U-shaped recovery, or whether it's a sustained period of pain. But it feels like that we're already on the improve. So I think back to our analysis paralysis conversation. I mean, activity creates activity, and if it's coming with the right intent to try to help people, regardless of what their situation is, then you can't really go wrong, can you?
No, well said. Absolutely right.
Will, you're a champion, you're a gentleman. Thanks so much for joining us on the series. Really appreciate your time.
No worries. Thanks, Alex. All the best, mate.
Cheers.